welcome to the Book Bunch. My name is Sam and it's so great to have you guys here for another video. Today we are doing pirate recommendations. I've been saying for weeks now I was going to get this video out and I just keep being delayed, but the time has come. I've just got them written down on a little sticky notes because most of these are actually ebooks and I don't have the physical copies of these. Only like 2 or 3 I actually have in the physical, and they have already been packed away. So I'm just going to share with you the covers over here and you can check them out for yourself. But the first one that is pirate related, and I mean, I'm going to make it a little bit of a broader spectrum than just pirates. Some of these books don't necessarily have pirates, but they are like seafaring, and then some of these books are like give you that same like treasure hunting magical feel that pirates give you. So they're not all specifically pirate, but they're close to, and I am including them in this for you guys because if you like pirate books you'll like these other ones, so that's why I'm saying it. First is Tress of the Emerald Sea. You guys have already heard me talk about this book a few times, but this book is one of Brandon Sanderson's latest books, and it is a standalone, so if you prefer to read standalones, this one is a great option. But this book is a really interesting take on pirates because the world that Brandon Sanderson has made has weird mechanics and weird physics. And so the ocean, there's 4 different oceans in this world, and each of them are like a different substance or maybe considered an element, I'm not quite sure. And so they all behave very differently. Pretty much all of them are deadly. And there's a weird phenomenon that happens where like the sea will just go dead flat, and anyone that is in the sea or like on a ship or whatever will be stuck where they are until the sea decides to start again. It's really interesting, super weird concept I've never heard of before in a book, so go check it out for that alone. But we follow this girl who grows up on this island, and she's kind of like the island that she's on is kind of segregated from the rest of society a little bit because they're kind of poor, and like there's not really much nobility except for the family that is like in control of the island. And she falls in love with this noble man's son, and this nobleman's son doesn't want to be the nobleman's son. He just wants to be free and like free to do his own things and be his own person. And he is in love with Tress too, which is really sweet. And he wants to marry her, but like he's not too sure how to go about it because like his family wouldn't approve, and he probably wouldn't be allowed to. And before they even get a chance to do anything about it, he gets shipped off by his father to go find a princess to marry or something. But on that voyage he goes missing, and no one cares to look for this nobleman's son, not even the nobleman. And that leaves Tress devastated because she's in love with this man, and so she decides if no one else is going to go find him, I will. So she leaves everything she's ever known and gets on a ship, becomes pirate essentially, and goes to save her true love. And it's very cute and very awesome, and the story is very exciting, and yeah, the mechanics alone of the world are enough to keep you interested. So that is Tress of the Emerald Sea. Then there is The Royal Rose Chronicles. Book 3 has just come out like a week or 2 ago, and I will say the first 2 books for me were definitely 5 out of 5 stars. This final book is not as good. I think I give it like a 4 or 4.5 on Goodreads or something. I can't quite remember. But it just doesn't, it doesn't have the same high stakes, I feel, as the first two. Like everything in this final book feels a little bit too easy and maybe even a bit rushed. Apart from that, though, I really enjoyed the story. The love story throughout this one is really beautiful. And yes, if you like pirates, this is like the ultimate clean pirate story. I would say there is, for most of it, very high stakes. People's lives are threatened and people get maimed, and it is still violent because pirate stories typically are, but like there's no swearing, there's no like sexual content or any of that kind of stuff. But it is a good time. So I do recommend the Royal Rose Chronicles. If you haven't read it yet, definitely go get your hands on that. Then there is the Soul Mark. This is the one on the list that I was referring to that I wouldn't consider it a pirate story. I know the author has said that she considers it to be a land pirate story, but I think that's a little bit of a stretch. However, the first third, I think, of the book takes place on a ship because they are like the main characters are on a voyage to get to an island that the rest of the story is set on. And so there is definitely seafaring stuff in there. It is set in a time where everyone's got like flintlock pistols and swords and that kind of thing. So still has that piratey vibe throughout. In regards to the land pirates, there is like this guy who is like an outlaw, and he is very evil, and like our main characters are in danger from this guy and his rabble of followers. So that's probably why it's considered land pirates. There's lots of stealing and things like that. This story does have prostitution in it, but it's not glorified and it's not like in detail. Like there's like nothing happens. It's just there are prostitutes in the story. So if that bothers you, it didn't bother me, but if it does bother you, just letting you know, it definitely is like adult. I wouldn't give it to a teen or a kid probably. Because yeah, it's some of the stuff that happens is quite brutal in the Soul Mark, but it is an adult book, so that is probably why. But I wouldn't say it's unclean. But yeah, I'm popping it in there because I feel like if you like pirate stories, you'd still like the Soul Mark. Just know that it's not specifically a pirate story. Then there is book 2 of the Weaver trilogy called The Story Raider. The whole series is not like seafaring or piratey in any way, but the second book is, because the main character has to go on a voyage to find I can't remember if it's a plant or an artifact, but she has to go find this thing. And so she goes with a group of people on a ship, and they get chased down by another ship throughout the process. So it has piratey vibes. I would consider it a pirate book, but it's just not quite the same level of pirates as, say, the Royal Rose Chronicles, where it's straight up pirates, if that makes sense, because the people are not pirates, but this part of their adventure is very much a pirate experience. I hope that makes sense. It's probably a very terrible explanation. Also, I haven't actually read book 3 yet, so I'm not sure if that continues for a little bit into book 3, but it's definitely all of book 2. Then there is the Wingfeather Saga. The main piratey parts of that book, or seafaring parts of that book, are in book 3 and 4. But there's kind of a theme of like seafaring throughout, because one of the main characters, who is the grandfather of the children, he is an ex-pirate, and as the story goes on, we find out about his past, and why he's no longer on the sea. And yeah, the characters do have to go on ships and do all of that stuff, so there is that in it. But again, it's not specifically pirates, but it's definitely seafaring and has a piratey, adventure-y vibe. There's also dragons in the ocean, so that's cool as well. If that sounds like something you would enjoy, Wingfeather Saga is great, and it is middle grade and above, like age appropriate, so you can read it as a family as well. Then there is Black Leviathan, which is one of my favorite books to mention because this book is amazing. It is a standalone, but I believe the author did want to like continue the story just because it's a great world. But like the first book definitely ends in such a way that you don't expect there to be a book 2. It's just like in the acknowledgements, he's like, hey, I'm probably going to write a book 2. So yes, that's Black Leviathan. It is a really interesting world as well. In this world, the land is bad. And essentially, if you end up on the land, you you are essentially left for dead or considered dead, because you are going to get killed straight away pretty much by these creatures that live on the land, and it's just a bad time. So what, like most of society live on these floating islands, and then they use these floating ships to like get between the islands and all of that. And so there is a big pirate element to this world, because yeah, there's lots of ships and stuff flying around, and perfect opportunity for there to be pirates. And there's also all these dragons in this world, flying dragons, and so like the pirates basically hunt the dragons because the dragons are like a commodity in this world. And we follow this one guy who essentially finds himself on a pirate ship, keen to hunt these dragons, and a whole adventure ensues, and it's quite dangerous and quite fun. And I've never read anything quite like it, but it's my favorite pirate story of all time, I think, because I also love dragons. But it was just flawless, absolute 5-star, and I totally recommend it. So if that sounds good to you, Black Leviathan, if you haven't already read it. Then there was Heart of the Sea, which I read relatively recently. I don't know if this is one of the books that hasn't come out yet or has just come out, but I'm popping it on the list because it's still a pirate story and it's still decent, but it definitely wasn't my favorite. Just because I struggled with the author's writing a little bit. It just felt a little bit disjointed, and like there was some key information missing in order for you to feel like the story flowed really well. Aside from that, I did really enjoy the story. I'm So Heart of the Sea is about this. We follow this main girl who she has been separated from her sister, and she's got these magical powers where she's like connected to the sea in some way, and can sort of control it, but she's never really been taught how to use it and has instead been taught to suppress it. And so she's like struggling with that power. But she is on a mission to go find her sister, who has disappeared into this like part of the world where people can't get to anymore because there's like magical protection or whatever, which results in people not being able to get there. And so she has to team up with this guy who has this pirate ship, and he also has his own power where he can like talk to and control and like see through the eyes of crows. And they have to team up together because they have similar desires, and there's this magic map that will help them get to where they need to be. But in order for the map to be read, the two people reading it have to have the same goal, like to get to the same place. And so they have to team up, and he kind of reluctantly teams up almost against his will because she hijacks his ship. And then they have to go, like the map takes them on this like journey to pick up all these different magical items, which always involves like life-threatening danger, to get to this area of the world that you're not meant to be able to get into anymore. And it's very interesting. There is a lot of like who is good and who is bad in the story. Will people be betrayed or not? That kind of thing. And yeah, it was a really good pirate story. It had like mermaids and sirens and like a big kraken thing. So it had like really cool classical like pirate fantasy creatures, which I really appreciated, because you rarely see them written into modern day pirate stuff anymore. So I was really happy with that. It was just the actual writing itself wasn't 100% for me, but still worth your time if you are interested. Then there is the Fiddler's Gun, which this is part of a duology or a trilogy, I can't quite remember. But I will preface this by saying you won't think it's a pirate story until you're more than 40% of the way in. Because it's not a pirate story until about 40% of the way in, and then it's like a crazy pirate story. This is also super brutal, levels of like violence and gore. There's no swearing or anything like that, but yeah, it's heavy on the violence. It didn't bother me too much. The only reason why it took me as surprise at first was because I thought it was a YA book or a middle grade book, but I definitely feel like it's got adult level violence. So just be aware of that depending on who you are letting read the book or suggesting the book to. I probably wouldn't read it or suggest it to anyone under 18, probably. Maybe 17 or 16, but definitely not under 16. But we follow this girl who has grown up in an orphanage, and she she lives in this orphanage, and she's like super rebellious, doesn't follow the rules, doesn't fit in with societal's expectations. Like, she does not care to be feminine in any way. She wants to fight with the boys and have punch ups and do hard, like the hard labor jobs that the boys do, like building. And like I think she is a bit afraid that she'll be seen as weak. And like she refuses to wear a dress, that kind of thing. And she drives the sisters that run the orphanage, because they're like, I think it's like nuns run it or something like that. She drives them a bit crazy, and yeah, she's like starting to become of age, so she's like 17 or 18 or something in the book, and her and her best friend Peter fall in love, and it's super cute. And by golly, because I haven't read the any point past the first book, so if the love story doesn't end well, I'm gonna be a bit devastated. But she gets assigned to work with the cook in this orphanage, and the cook is an ex-pirate who ended up finding Christ, and so turned away from his pirate life because like his pirate life was full of a lot of murder and bad things. And so for the last 20 years he's been working in this orphanage, cooking for the kids and just trying to live a good life and be right with God and that kind of thing. But then a bunch of things go down, and there is like a war, because I think it's set in the Civil War that happened in America, between America and England or something like that. I don't know much about that war. But yes, whatever that was, when America became independent. And so this is set at like the start of that war, where all the British soldiers were starting to like come to America to keep the peace, and like they were causing fights and like taking over towns and stuff. And yes, some stuff ensues, and our main character ends up having to flee or be hung, basically. And so she ends up on a pirate ship and part of this pirate crew. And it's really interesting. I had a really good time. I kind of wouldn't have even minded if it never turned into a pirate story, but I am so glad it did, because once the pirate stuff started happening, it really felt like a pirate book and a pirate series. So I'm really looking forward to continuing it. I think maybe I gave it a 4.5 on Goodreads. I can't quite remember, but it was definitely really good. Had a good time. Sorry. And looking forward to the rest of it. So that's The Fiddler's Gun. And then there is finally The Mermaid's Tale, which I'm adding on here because it is not pirates, but it is mermaids, which normally go hand in hand with pirates. And this is about like a major treasure hunt type of situation. So I feel like if you like the pirate stories for like the more magical creatures and the treasure part, you'd like this. So I'm tacking it on to the end of this. But I had a really good time with The Mermaid's Tale. I cannot wait for the next book to come out, because this one ends on a cliffhanger, just so you know. But there's like magic and like it's very cool. And it's set, so it's meant to be like you follow the like great granddaughter or something of Ariel, and it's like a slightly different story. So what happened is Ariel, who isn't called Ariel in this, but like you get the point, she fell in love with this boy from the land and wanted legs, and the witch was like, okay, then you have to give me your voice in a pendant for me to keep forever. And she was like, yep, I agree. And she's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to curse your family, so that one kid in every generation is going to be like basically a mutant, and will be like shunned by society, essentially. Because either there'll be a human child that has mermaid features, or there will be a mermaid child that has human features. And she's like, yep, I agree. So she goes to the land, gets her legs, marries the prince, but decides not to give her voice. That is until her first child has this curse, and she her kid then like runs away to the sea and ends up falling in love with a mermaid. And so like the generations continue. But Ariel, because of her being so devastated that her kid was born the way like cursed, she basically decides like, okay, I'm gonna go return the voice to stop this curse. So her and Eric, who isn't actually named Eric, but you get the point, they go on a voyage with a bunch of treasure and this voice to repay this witch to hopefully get the curse stopped. But like just before they arrive, they get shipwrecked and die. And this treasure gets lost. And it's like a big deal in the mermaid community. But no one's ever found it. And Atlantis is also in this world, which I thought was super cool. And they're like super technologically advanced. And so they kind of have a deal with some of the mermaids. And yeah, we follow this girl who is a mermaid, but she's been born with legs. And so she's like a major outcast. And normally when one of these are born, they get killed by the village. And so, yeah, she was kind of left to die, but then was like taken in. And she ends up having to, well, her and this guy who she's related to through marriage, who she also really has a crush on, they have to go on this mission to find this big treasure, or basically their whole family is going to be murdered by the king, like the mermaid king. And so they go on this journey to try and find this big treasure, and she's hoping that she'll be able to find the locket that's got the voice in it so that she can return it to the witch and get the curse removed. Because like just as they were leaving, her sister, who is related to, like, her sister who is married to the main guy's brother, yeah, they have kids, but then like the one that she just has at like the start of this story is the one in the generation that has legs. And so yeah, they don't want her to get killed, and don't want her to be shunned like the main character was. And so the main character's like, I need to do this for my niece. And yeah, things don't go to plan as always, and stakes are pretty high, and they keep getting stuck in this peril. And it turns out there's this whole like bigger thing going on under the sea that they didn't know about, that they're about to get sucked into. And I'm hoping we'll find out, like, it's kind of leading up that we'll find out more about that in book 2. Because yes, it's a very interesting plot. But that's kind of all I can say. It's complicated, but it was really good. And yeah, I think if you like pirate stuff, you would still like that. I wasn't a huge fan of Little Mermaid, and I didn't feel like this was like ultra feminine or gave me Disney vibes in any way. But I do think it was cool that she connected it to, like, very distantly connected it to this story we are familiar with. Same with her connecting it to Atlantis. Like, I love Atlantis. I love the idea of that, and I like that she connected these different things that we know to a whole new story. That was really interesting. But yeah, that is The Mermaid's Tale. And I believe that one is about to release. I don't think it has actually come out yet, because I believe I got the arc for that from the author. But yes, that is everything for the pirate recommendations / seafaring / treasure hunting books. But I hope you guys liked this video. If you guys have any suggestions of ones you want me to try and review for you guys, please let me know, because I do really struggle to find pirate books that are clean. I've read so many that have not made it onto this list because they are just crude or rude in some way, and I just could not in good conscience recommend them to you. And it's always disappointing to me because, yeah, I love pirates. I just don't like the like stuff that can come along with that. So if you know of any and you want me to give it a review, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.